The Learning Assistant program comes out of Colorado Boulder. We're using that model at Sacramento State. Our LA program was started at Sac State by Dr. Vera Marganiner, who is a physics and astronomy professor. Most people have heard of TAs, teaching assistants, and there are similarities between TAs and LAs because TAs are also generally helping a faculty member in a large classroom. But one of the reasons that they're called learning assistants is that they're not meant to be experts in either pedagogy or the discipline that they're working in. They are still learning as they go. The learning assistant actually trains for their job in a very different way than most TAs do. The learning assistant takes a pedagogy seminar where once a week they read the literature in science education and cognitive psychology, and then they come to that weekly session for an hour and they do some sort of activity on metacognition. We discuss the paper they read, and we really talk about how they can now apply what they've learned. So the learning assistants, I think, are critical to the flipped classroom because if I have 80 students working on problem sets for the better part of an hour, I may only be able to get around to 20 of those really reasonably. And so what happens with the learning assistants is they're spread out throughout the room, and say students get stuck on a particular problem set. That learning assistant is right there to get them back on track, to answer simple questions. We also teach our learning assistants to listen very carefully and to facilitate discussion. And so rather than answering a question right away, our learning assistant might turn that around and ask the student a few questions to figure out what they already know.
Students know a lot more than they think they do. They might be turned away when they read something and don't get it right away, but once you start giving them questions that guide them to the answer, they realize they know more than they thought they did. And asking students questions may sound fairly easy, but it's actually very challenging to ask guided questions that will get the student to where they need to be.
So the challenge with facilitating discussion is that there's never a one-size-fits-all list of questions to ask, and there's really only so much time in a given class period, so you have to be efficient and zero in on why a student is not grasping a certain concept. And it's not enough to just ask questions that lead to the answer. The goal is to empower the student to clarify their own misunderstandings, to disprove what they previously thought to be correct.
We've surveyed our students extensively, and over 90% of the students in class say that the LAs are helping them in the classroom. But what was interesting to us is that nearly 40% of students in our class indicated that LAs provided some sort of assistance that was unrelated to curriculum. A lot of times the LAs are providing advice on what classes to take or what instructors to take or the sequence. And then about another 30% of students said that the LAs would meet with them outside of class. And so we were actually surprised at how much support the LAs were providing our students outside of the class period. If an LA takes my Bio 2 class as a lower division student and then they LA for me for a couple of semesters, they build a huge foundation and they also learn how to learn. And so as they get into their upper division courses, they really outperform a lot of their peers. They're top students. They develop leadership skills. They develop communication skills. Sometimes they work in another peer-assisted learning program. A lot of them go and do research. But even beyond their undergraduate careers, we're seeing them go into a variety of different postgraduate environments. We have LAs that are in K through 12 teaching and are now actually teaching in the Sacramento area. I've also had students who want to work for state government agencies for teaching the public, maybe about, climate change and stuff like that. We have LAs that are in professional schools, so pharmacy school and medical schools. We also have LAs that go into graduate programs now. In fact, I have several of my long-term LAs are now part of our graduate teaching associate program at Sac State. And so they're now teaching classes independently here as GTAs.
Although I am currently a master's student at Sacramento State, my ultimate career goal is to become a primary care physician. I currently work at East Davis Medical Center. I saw firsthand how these physicians were able to communicate with their patients, and the kind of teaching that they had to do was very relevant to the kind of teaching that the Learning Assistant program taught me.
LAs that don't decide to go into teaching but maybe are in graduate school or in a professional school or something like that, they have an expertise that others can seek out. And so the LAs are a resource because they don't only have their disciplinary knowledge, but they have knowledge of an entirely different field, which is the educational field.